Dr. Mohammed Al Hilal. This is our third lecture of sociolinguistics. Today we are going to talk about the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. Then we are going to talk about the linguistic relativity and linguistic determinism. Then we are going to move to the other chapter, chapter 3, where we talk about language and politics. We are going to define the term politics. We talk about ideology and the role of language in establishing ideology. We are going also to consider political discourse. We have 2 points to discuss as well, presupposition and implicature. Then we are going to talk about the persuasive language and the rhetorical devices. We are going to start with Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. This hypothesis says that there is a causative link between culture and language. So language and culture are related to each other in a causative way. According to this theory, a community cultural experience shapes their language. What does that mean? That our language is affected by our culture, and our culture relates to our language. We are going to have an example which is going to show us how our language is going to be affected by the culture that we have. I have an example of the word coffee. If you said the word coffee in front of an English speaker, this term will not be as ambiguous as it is to another speaker like a Japanese native speaker. Because according to the English culture, a coffee is usually hot, a cup of coffee, usually hot coffee. But in Japan, according to their culture, they can drink hot coffee or cold coffee. So if you offer coffee to a Japanese native speaker, he would ask you another question: what type of coffee are you going to offer me? Is it cold? Is it hot? Is it iced? Etc. So the image that you can see here is the first one. When you offer the coffee to an English native speaker, it doesn't make any problem because usually they drink their coffee hot. But in the case of a Japanese native speaker, this would be ambiguous because he would expect either cold or iced coffee or hot coffee. Now, according to this theory, we have what's known as linguistic relativity and linguistic determinism. A linguistic relativity means that different cultures involve distinct system of representation. That if we have one thing, it is represented differently according to the language of the speaker, according to the culture that he has. The example we have here is that if we have a sentence, each speaker of a different language would represent this sentence differently in accordance with the culture that he has. The sentence is, the student bought the book. Now, in English, the tense of the verb is distinct. We would know that the verb buy has a past form which is bought. Now, the same sentence in Indonesian language, the distinction of the tense is optional. It is not necessary that you refer to the pastness or the presentness of the tense of the sentence. So there is no obligation on distinguishing the tense of the sentence in Indonesian language. Now, if you consider the same sentence in Turkish, they specify whether the action was witnessed by somebody or not. So this is not actually found in the English culture, because when you tell anybody any action, he would not expect you to tell him whether this action was witnessed by another person or not. So in the Turkish culture, the speaker need to decide whether this action has been witnessed by somebody or it is just somebody said this action. In Russian, the gender distinction is included. This is also found in Arabic, because if you say the word book in English, we do not know whether the book is feminine or masculine, but in Russian, in Arabic, we would say the book as a masculine noun. So according to the culture, language is represented, and vice versa. So this means that culture has an influence on language, and language is represented differently through cultures. So speakers of different languages refer to different aspects of the word. That is, their language affects the way they think. Now, with regard to linguistic relativity, let's have an Arabic example which would make it very easy for us to understand. I have the example, زارت نادية صديقتها. Now in this example, the word friend, صديقتها, we are easily distinguishing that this noun is a feminine noun, but in English this is not the case, because I would say Nadia visited her friend, but we are not sure, we do not know whether this friend is a male or a female. So according to the Arabic culture, the noun has to be gendered. We need to know the gender or the sex of the person referred to. So speakers of different language, as we said before, refer to different aspects of the word, and this means that their language affects the way they think. Now we move to the other part of the theory, which is linguistic determinism. And the idea behind this point is that our language determines the way we think. We think in accordance with the structure of the language that we have. So linguistic determinism, language affects the thought processes of its speaker. The language you speak determines the way that you will interpret the word around you. Our language determines how we see the word. We cannot see the word in any other way. Language and its structure limit and determine human knowledge or thought, and individual experience the word based on the grammatical structure of their language. And if you look at these two images now, language affects the way we think, because our thoughts are based on our language. So no matter what our language gives us, all our thinking is related to the structure of our native language. This is everything with regard to the hypothesis of Whorf. We move to the third chapter, which is about language and politics and the relation between the two. First of all, we need to decide what does the word politics means. Then we move to further aspects of this chapter. The term politics is concerned with power, the power to make decisions, the power to control resources and to control other people's behavior and their values. So there is no keeping out of politics. It is almost everybody is involved in politics. Now we are going to see how we are involved as average people in politics in our everyday life. In everyday decisions and politics, there is a very close relation. For example, in a supermarket, if you go to a supermarket and you want to buy certain brand of coffee or of vegetable, you have to choose this brand rather than the other. Now, this choice would affect the company who is producing this brand. So even this contribution to this company is very small, but on the long run, when there is a large number of people choosing this brand rather than the other, they are actually affecting the existence of this company. So when you choose a specific brand, you make a small contribution to the continued existence of a particular company. The same thing applies when you buy recycled paper goods or you decide to buy non-recycled paper goods. Now, this choice has to do with politics because you are actually choosing one company rather than the other, and by this you are actually selecting this company to continue to exist and ignoring the other one. And choosing organically grown vegetable is also different from a choice of a genetically modified vegetable. So the choice is very important. You are actually being political in your choice, so this choice will determine the future of these product and tells us about which product, for example, is more prominent than the other. The other example I have is buying imported food rather than food produced in our own country. So even those decisions, though they are little decisions, we do them every day in our everyday life, they are very effective, they have a political flavor in them. I move to the other point, which is politics and ideology. How can we achieve political beliefs? If I'm a person, if I'm a politician, I have certain beliefs. How can I make other people adhere or obey my belief or obey my commands? We have actually 3 ways to make people adhere to what we instruct them to do. For example, we have physical coercion. Now, physical coercion is using force, using physical power to force somebody to do your commands or to do what you ask him to do. And this physical coercion is associated with dictatorial regimes, with government which apply force rather than law. The other way is exactly the opposite. When we have legal laws and we have regulation for almost everything in the government. So this type of laws are associated with democratic countries where you have a law regulating car parking, regulating places where anybody can buy or drink alcohol, etc. So we have laws that regulate people's life. So this is kind of democratic law that a politician can follow or can employ to make people adhere to his beliefs. The third one is called persuasion and consent, when you want people to agree on what you want them to do. The best type of persuasion is to convince people that what you want is the same thing that they want. So they voluntarily will do whatever you want them to do without forcing them, without using power, or without employing certain regulation or rules. So persuading people to act voluntarily in the way you want. What you want is what the people also want, and to achieve this we need what's called ideology. Now, what's ideology? What's the definition of ideology? Can we change ideology of a certain community or society? Ideology is a set of beliefs which, according to the people, they believe in those traditions or belief or ideological ideas. These sets of beliefs appear to be logical. They are, according to them, they are logical, they are natural. Now, can we question the ideology of a certain country? Can we change it? Is it possible to ask why this tradition is there? Why should I adhere to this ideology of this society? Now, it is possible to question it, but it is not that easy. It is difficult, it is challenging, and it appears to not to make sense, and there is a price for this to be paid. What does this mean? If a certain community or a certain society has a set number of traditions, and suddenly someone comes and say, okay, I would not accept this, I need to change this, I would not accept that, this is not possible, can we change that, can we change this? This is very difficult because everybody would not agree with this. This person who wants to change would look as if he's not making sense at all, and he might pay a price that people would go against him, and it is actually a very challenging task to do. Now we move to the conversation that a politician usually use, or what we call political discourse or political speech. And we are going to consider presupposition and implicature. We are going to define each one and have an example related to each one as well. Starting with a general definition of these two terms, presupposition and implicature are tools that can lead the hearer to make assumptions about the existence of information that is not made explicit in what is actually said. So if somebody said something to you, there is a piece of information which is implied. He has not really said it, but he the speaker has referred to it indirectly. We will have an example and see what's meant by these two terms. An example is, why did you kill your wife? If somebody asks this question to a person who is guilty of killing his wife, for example, and why did you kill your wife? This sentence presupposes that the listener has really killed his wife, but in fact it is not proven yet that the wife was killed and that this person is the one who has killed the wife. And if you ask this question, you are actually presupposing that this is the one who killed the wife. Now let's move to the definition of presupposition. Presupposition is the background assumption, so you are assuming something. Embedded, it's not clear, it is implicit, it is not explicit, it is embedded within a sentence or within a phrase. Let us have this example. We want to set people free. Now if a certain politician says, we want to set people free, now this sentence would presuppose that people are not currently free, which is not always true. So he is trying to advocate certain political message to the people he wants them to support, saying we need or we want to set people free, as if those people are not free now. So this sentence is a type of a presupposition that presupposes that currently people are not free. How to use preposition in a sentence? We have three ways. First one is using adjective, second one using possessive, and third one using question. When I use an adjective to include a presupposition in my sentence, this type of adjective is usually comparative adjective. Now let's take this example. We have two types of comparative adjective, good, better, and fair, fairer. So let's take an example of the first case, good, better. If somebody says, we want or we need a better teacher, we need a better teacher. Now this sentence presupposes that the current teacher is not good enough, or he is not good at all. So saying better teacher, meaning that we already have a teacher, but this teacher is not good. So this sentence presupposes that the current teacher is not really good. Let's take another example of fair and fairer. The government will introduce a fairer funding for schools. Now again, using this adjective, this comparative adjective, would suggest that the speaker presupposes that the current funding that the government produce or the government introduce is not fair enough, is not fair at all. So this is a type of presupposition where the adjective, the comparative adjective used would indicate the presupposition in the sentence. The other type is when we use possessives, and the example we have here, we will not talk about Sally's problem anymore. We will not talk about Sally's problems anymore. Now this sentence presupposes two things. Presupposes that we have already talked about Sally's problem, and it also presupposes that Sally really had problems. So using possessive in this way would also help in forming sentences indicating presuppositions. The other way, when we use questions instead of statements. So instead of saying an affirmative sentence, you would make your sentence as if it were a question. And in this way you are actually presupposing something that is not really or not explicitly included in your sentence. The example is it not now time to study hard? Now if you say this sentence to a student which you know he is not really good enough at studying, and you say, is it not now enough? Is it not now time to study hard? Now this sentence presupposes that the listener or the student did not study hard before, or actually he is a more or less a lazy student. So you are saying this sentence to presuppose that this student has not studied hard and he is lazy, he needs to study harder than he already did. Another example of using questions rather than a statement for presupposition is that do not you think that we should make use of our time? Now, if you are spending some time on something that's a waste of your time, and you would say this sentence in a way of a question, don't you think that we should make use of our time? Now, this sentence in the form of a question rather than a statement would presupposes that we have really wasted our time. We have wasted some time and we need to really make use of our time. Now we move to what we call implicature. An implicature leads the listener, the person who listens to the speaker, to infer, to deduce, to learn something that was not explicitly asserted by the speaker. So we want the person who is listening to us to realize certain information, but this information is not really said. It is embedded in an indirect way. Now, actually, this meaning is more or less similar to the meaning we talked about before, presupposition. But what distinguishes presupposition from implicature? We would know this by studying the characteristics of implicature, which are implicature operates over more than one sentence. So to have a sentence or to have a conversation where there is an example of implicature, you need to know more than one sentence, probably the sentence before or the sentence after, so that you realize the implicature. So implicature operates over more than one sentence, unlike presupposition, in which we have only one sentence and the preposition is clear. And in implicature, we depend on shared knowledge between the speaker and the hearer. So in order for your message to get through, both you and the speaker and the listener should have some certain knowledge that they share. They need something shared, common background that they both know, common area, common, let's say, shared knowledge, shared place of study, etc., that they know, that both of them know, so that the implicature becomes clear. And implicature also depends on the surrounding context of the conversation or the surrounding context of the discourse. So three things. First of all, more than one sentence. Second, both the speaker and the listener have some shared knowledge, and both and the implicature depends on the context of the conversation, so that you need to know some background information about the conversation going on. Let's have an example. I have two people, A and B. A says, will Sally be at the meeting this afternoon? Will Sally be at the meeting this afternoon? Now, B answers, her car broke down. Now, he didn't say whether yes, she is going to come to the meeting, or no, she isn't coming, but he said her car broke down. Now, what's the implicature of this sentence is that Sally will not be able to come to the meeting simply because her car was broken or was broken down. So this means that we deduce the message from one single sentence or more than one single sentence, from more than one sentence. And because also this depends on the context, there is some shared knowledge between A and B, because A would know that Sally would use her car to come to the meeting. So both of them realize that there is shared knowledge between them, and they base their conversation on this knowledge. So to understand this implicature, we have more than one sentence, A and B, and we have shared knowledge between the speaker and the listener, and we have some context, which is a party or meeting to which Sally would come. This is the end of today's lecture. Hopefully next lecture we are going to start with chapter 4, and before that we have to continue this chapter by talking about certain aspects of rhetoric which a politician usually use, and we call this rhetorical devices. We will talk about similes, metaphor, and personification. Thank you very much for today, and see you next lecture. Thank you.